Step inside the ultimate time capsule of human failure. Hidden in the shadows of the European landscape are colossal structures built for eternity, now completely surrendered to the elements. From cursed Victorian orphanages to rotting Olympic stadiums, we are exploring the most unbelievable abandoned megastructures on the continent. But none are more terrifying than a massive secret compound near Berlin that hosted both the highest ranks of the Nazi war machine and the Soviet Red Army. How does a highly fortified city that survived the deadliest conflicts in human history end up as a toxic, forgotten wasteland? We will reveal the answer at the end of our countdown. Deep in the rugged Rhodope Mountains of Bulgaria, far away from any modern city, sits a lonely, crumbling monument to faith. This is the Church of the Holy Mother of God at Asen's Fortress, a stone sanctuary constructed back in the 12th century. It is a tiny, fragile structure, but it holds an incredibly heavy history. During the Ottoman era, this region saw massive demographic shifts, and rural populations were forced to abandon their homes and their sacred spaces. For centuries, this little church sat completely empty, battered by harsh mountain winds and forgotten by the world. It fell into such a deep state of isolation that by the year 1899, local villagers started reporting terrifying encounters. People walking past the ruined walls claimed they saw strange glowing lights flickering in the empty windows and heard the unmistakable sound of ghostly choirs chanting in the dead of night. These stories caused such a panic that Greek and Bulgarian religious leaders actually held torchlit processions up the mountain to perform midnight services to calm the spirits. Another similar site, the Kremikovtsi Monastery, suffered the exact same fate, left to rot until its priceless 15th century frescoes of the Dormition of the Mother of God were almost lost to the elements entirely. These tiny, ancient ruins prove that even buildings designed to last for eternity cannot survive without people to care for them. Moving from ancient stone to bizarre modern concrete, we travel to the Steglitz neighborhood of West Berlin. Rising 47 meters into the sky, hovering directly over a busy highway, is a building that looks exactly like a giant psychedelic mushroom. This is the Bierpinsel, which translates to the beer brush. Built in 1976, this tower was the ultimate symbol of futuristic pop art architecture. The architects, a husband and wife team, wanted to create a vibrant commercial hub with restaurants, a nightclub, and a sports bar. On opening day, they handed out free beer to the massive crowds, which quickly turned into a disaster when drunk patrons started dropping their plastic cups from the top balconies onto the pedestrians walking below. But the real disaster was the building's design. The tower had absolutely terrible thermal insulation. During the freezing Berlin winters, the heating costs were so astronomical that business after business went totally bankrupt trying to keep the place warm. Burst pipes flooded the interior, and by 2006, the tower was abandoned. 4 years later, street artists were allowed to cover the entire exterior in thousands of liters of bright, trippy graffiti, much to the anger of the original architects. This pop art tower is bizarre, but wait until you hear about the massive, forbidden city hiding in the German forest coming up later. Today, a property group named Imoma owns the Bierpinsel and plans to turn it into office spaces, but they are legally forced to strip away the beloved graffiti to restore its original red paint, trapping the strange mushroom in a weird state of limbo. In the United Kingdom, just outside of Glasgow, lies a very different kind of architectural tragedy. Gartloch Hospital looks like a majestic French Renaissance palace, complete with beautiful red sandstone walls and highly decorated twin towers. But this was no palace for royalty. Opened in 1896, the city built this sprawling complex as a district asylum to house the poorest and most vulnerable mentally ill patients. At its absolute peak, 830 people were confined within its walls. It was designed as a completely self-contained village, physically isolating its patients from the rest of normal society. One famous patient, Robin Farquharson, even helped start a union for mental patients while locked inside during the 1970s. However, As medical treatments evolved and society realized that locking people away in giant asylums was cruel and ineffective, the hospital emptied out and officially closed its doors in 1996. Since then, the massive estate has become a battleground. Property developers bought the surrounding land and knocked down the smaller hospital buildings to build luxury modern homes. Yet, the main administration building with its iconic towers remains a terrifying, hollowed-out shell. Developers desperately want to build even more houses to fund the rescue of the main building, but strict modern climate policies and environmental rules about soil and drainage keep blocking their plans. So the once grand asylum sits rotting, surrounded by brand new suburban homes, a dark reminder of how society used to treat its most fragile minds. If you think Gartloch is creepy, our next stop is pure nightmare fuel. Welcome to Newsham Park Hospital in Liverpool, a colossal Victorian structure covering 99,000 square feet. This imposing red brick fortress started its life in 1874 as the Seamen's Orphan Institution. Liverpool was the heart of the British Maritime Empire, and every single year, thousands of sailors died at sea from terrible storms or exotic diseases, leaving their children completely alone. This orphanage was built to house 400 of those grieving children. The conditions inside were incredibly strict and unforgiving. The most famous and terrifying legend from this era centers around the top floor, an area now known as the Naughty Boys Corridor. The story goes that a small, unloved child was locked inside a dark wooden cupboard as a harsh punishment and completely forgotten about by the staff, only to be found dead days later. Today, ghost hunters claim to hear the sounds of knocking, screaming, and sobbing echoing from those very cupboards. During the mid-20th century, the building transitioned into a psychiatric hospital, taking in severe cases from other closing asylums. By 1997, the hospital was abandoned entirely, and the government sealed all patient records for a full century. Stepping inside today is like stepping into a horror movie. Broken hospital beds sit in decaying rooms, rusted wheelchairs line the dark hallways, and in the basement mortuary, the heavy metal doors of the body refrigerators still hang wide open on their hinges. The building is now owned by Angle Farm Limited, who want to turn it into an events venue, but right now it survives by hosting paranormal tours with waiting lists that stretch for over 18 months. If you're enjoying the video, kindly like and subscribe. Our next abandoned giant takes us away from haunted hospitals and into the fierce competitive world of international sports. In the heart of Rome stands the Flaminio Stadium, an absolute masterpiece of 20th century engineering. Designed by the legendary architect Pier Luigi Nervi for the 1960 Olympic Games, this stadium was a marvel of raw, exposed concrete. Nervi used highly experimental, undulating slabs of thin concrete to create a gorgeous canopy over the grandstands. It was built to hold 50,000 screaming fans and hosted massive football matches and international rugby tournaments for decades. But underneath the stands, the complex was a bustling city of sports, featuring a 25-meter swimming pool, fencing halls, and boxing rings. Unfortunately, as the decades passed, the experimental concrete began to fail. The harsh weather and years of deferred maintenance caused the delicate structures to crack and rot. Modern sports teams demanded massive VIP lounges, giant parking lots, and heavy roofs, none of which this fragile stadium could support. By 2011, the stadium was totally abandoned, left to be swallowed by overgrown weeds and graffiti. Today, the Italian football club SS Lazio is pushing a massive €480 million rescue plan. They want to completely rebuild the inside, bringing the capacity back to over 50,000 seats, while adding 57,000 square meters of special sound-absorbing materials to keep the noise away from the neighbors. But saving this concrete dinosaur is proving to be a legal nightmare, as heritage groups fight to protect Nervi's original, crumbling vision from being destroyed by modern commercial greed. A rotting stadium is sad, but just wait until you see the colossal, abandoned military empire we saved for the very end. Before we get there, we must travel to the sun-baked Mediterranean island of Malta. Stretching across 450,000 square meters of prime, beautiful coastline is the White Rocks Complex. Built in the 1960s by the British military, this massive compound was originally known as the St. Patrick's Officers' Married Quarters. It was a high-quality, self-contained neighborhood with 4-bedroom houses, central heating, and private garages for military families. When the British military finally left Malta in 1979, the government transformed the barracks into a holiday resort, mostly housing foreign students learning English. But by 1995, the tourists stopped coming, and the site was completely abandoned. Over the last 30 years, the ocean winds have ripped the doors and windows off the hinges. The buildings are totally gutted. However, this decay gave birth to something beautiful. White Rocks has become a legendary open-air art gallery for urban explorers and graffiti artists. Huge, incredibly detailed murals cover the walls, including a massive painting of the Monopoly Man riding in a cart pulled by oxen that stretches 3 stories high. For decades, greedy developers tried to buy the land to build 7-star luxury hotels, but they always fought with the government over the price. Finally, in late 2025, the Prime Minister declared that the land would never be sold to developers. Instead, the ruins will be cleared, and the entire coast will be returned to the public as a massive national ecological park, proving that sometimes nature wins in the end. Before we reveal our final, most massive abandoned city, we have to mention a wild card that defies all logic. High up on a freezing remote mountain peak in Bulgaria sits the Buzludzha Monument. It looks exactly like a massive concrete flying saucer that crashed into the earth. Built in 1981 by the communist regime, this brutalist UFO was designed to honor the socialist movement. It required thousands of volunteers and army units to construct the 70-meter-tall tower in the massive central hall, which could hold 5,000 people under a ceiling covered in millions of tiny mosaic tiles depicting socialist heroes. When the regime fell in 1989, the doors were locked, the roof caved in, and the freezing snow destroyed the incredible artwork inside. It remains one of the most haunting and surreal abandoned structures anywhere on the planet. Finally, we arrive at the absolute king of abandoned places. Just a 40-minute drive south of Berlin lies Wunsdorf-Waldstadt, a site so secretive it was erased from civilian maps. This massive 60,000-acre compound in the dense pine forests has hosted the darkest military forces in modern history. During the Second World War, the Nazis turned it into the supreme nerve center for their war machine. They built highly sophisticated, bomb-proof underground bunkers with concrete walls over 3 meters thick, disguised from the air as innocent rural farmhouses. From these subterranean rooms, the German High Command directed their global war. But in April 1945, the Soviet Red Army rolled into the compound without a fight. For the next 50 years, the Soviets transformed this forest into their absolute high command for all forces in East Germany. The locals called it the Forbidden City, or Little Moscow. East German civilians were strictly banned from coming anywhere near the perimeter. Inside the fences, it was a thriving, self-contained universe for 75,000 Soviet men, women, and children. They built their own massive supermarkets, schools, a grand theater, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and even ran a daily direct train straight to Moscow. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, the order came to abandon everything. In 1994, the last train rolled out and the city was left to die. The retreating army left behind thousands of tons of toxic chemicals, live ammunition, and 45,000 cubic meters of garbage. Today, exploring the Forbidden City is a surreal experience. You can walk through the rotting Grand Theater where the curtains are still drawn, or wander the empty swimming pool devoid of water. Deep in the woods, a lonely, decaying statue of Vladimir Lenin still stares out over the crumbling officer's house. It is a terrifyingly quiet monument to the rise and fall of empires, slowly being eaten alive by the very forest they tried to conquer. If you want to see another unbelievable megastructure, click the video on screen right now to discover the secrets behind the world's largest dome.